Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm giving you my March wrap up. I'm a bit late with filming this again because I just kept forgetting about it and now I have only a few days before I leave on holiday and I won't be back until right before May starts. So I really want to get this filmed and uploaded and edited before I upload it today. But luckily for me, I guess I didn't read that many books in March, so we're probably going to go through these quite quickly. The first book I finished in March was I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson, and this is one of the books on my list of 10 books I have to read in 2023. This is actually the first one that I finished. You might remember from February or January that I was reading 4321 by Paul Auster, but I DNF'd it because it was way too long and way too boring. I still need to read another Paul Auster instead of that one, so this is the first one. No, that's not true. I also read Percy Jackson. Phew! I was beginning to think that I was really behind already on this challenge, but I'm only a little behind on this challenge. Anyway, I finished I'll Give You the Sun and I ended up giving it 3 stars. And actually I debated DNFing this one as well while I was reading it, but I didn't want to DNF 2 books from the list of 10 books. So I kept on going and it did grab my interest a little bit more when we got towards the ending, which is why I did get 3 stars, but I'll get into why I was a bit bored in a second. This is a book about 2 siblings, Noah and Jude. They are twins and they live in a bit of a sleepy seaside town with their parents who don't seem to have a very happy marriage. We follow the twins in 2 different timelines. One is the timeline where they are 13 and this is told through the eyes of Noah. And the other timeline is when they are 16 and it is told through the eyes of his sister Jude. Between these 2 timelines, something terrible has happened to them. You find that out very quickly. And the more you read, the more you get to know about what happened to them, how they grew apart, because in the first timeline they're still very close when they are 13, but when they are 16 they are barely speaking. So there's a bit of mystery going on. It's definitely a coming of age story. The reason why I was having a hard time getting through this book is that it's pretty big. I think it's way too long at over 400 pages. It didn't really have to be that long, I think. I really enjoyed Jude's timeline. So when they were 16, we follow her as she finds her way towards dealing with certain trauma and certain emotions. I found that very interesting. But I was not that interested in Noah's timeline when they were 13. And the thing with these timelines and these perspectives is that they are not just alternating chapters, they are alternating chunks of book. So when you follow Noah, you follow him for at one point about 100 pages. And that was exactly when I got bored and when I had trouble getting through this. I can't really say what really had me bored in his storyline. I didn't really enjoy him as a character. I thought the writing was a bit too flowery for my liking for young adult fiction. Sometimes it really worked, sometimes I rolled my eyes at it a little bit. But in the end, what did lead me to giving this 3 stars, because 3 stars is a pretty high rating for everything I've just told you, is the exploration of grief and trauma. That was really well done in this book. I really enjoyed Jude's storyline and her relationship with an artist that becomes kind of a mentor for her. This book is very good with emotions and exploring them. It just was very long-winded about it sometimes. The next 2 books I finished were 2 Dutch books and I won't be going into much detail about them. They were these 2. Dutch book lovers will probably recognize these because they were part of the National Book Week that happens every year in the Netherlands. This was the gift, because with the National Book Week in the Netherlands, when you buy a book worth about 12.50 or 15 euros, you get this book as a gift with it. It's always a story written by a famous Dutch author. This time it was this one and it was alright. I gave it 3 stars. It was about a little boy who becomes friends with the son of a refugee family in the 90s, I think. And it's about his relationship with his friend and them trying to find a way for his friend and his family to stay. It was alright. I didn't think it was particularly great. And then the other book is always an essay that sells for about 5 euros. This time it was this one, Boto Banya. This was very good. I gave it 5 stars. It's an exploration of the author's roots. He goes on a journey to the Caribbean. It discusses slavery, but it's mostly a celebration of Black authors throughout the years. And it was really great. So if you're in the Netherlands and you haven't bought this yet, It's still for sale in a lot of bookstores, so I highly recommend picking up a copy. Then we move on to the next book I finished, and it was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This is a book I picked up specifically for a reading prompt. This was for the Buzzword Reading Challenge, and the prompt for March was to read a book that had the word secret in the title. And I didn't have a book with the word secret in the title that I hadn't already read. And I'd heard about this one, it sounded really fun. So I bought it and read it specifically for this prompt. This is a book about a woman named Mika. She is approaching her 30s, I think, and she is a witch. She lives in Britain. This is just the real world, only it has witches in it. But regular people don't know, and the witches work very hard to keep it that way. They don't meet up with one another, except I think once every 3 months they get together in a certain location that's different every time. Being a witch is a very lonesome experience in this book, and Mika has had a pretty lonely life so far. Also, an important detail is that when a witch is born, it will soon become an orphan because of a certain curse. But then Mika is approached through social media by someone who asks her to become the teacher of 3 young witches in a remote estate, I think somewhere in the south of England. And of course this sounds a little suspicious, but she feels good about it and she does it. And there she finds a new family for her to become part of, basically. It's very found family, this story. It's a very sweet story about her teaching these girls everything she knows about magic. There is a romance involved as well, between her and someone living in this house too. There isn't very much to this story. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars because I really did enjoy it, but I did feel it lacked a little bit of depth. I really enjoy cozy romantic fantasies, especially if they're set in the real world. And this was that, so I was kind of expecting this to be a 5-star or at least a 4 or 4.5 star read for me. But there was just something that was a little bit lacking. It felt very middle of the road. The romance was fine, but I didn't feel especially strongly about it. I liked Mika as a main character. She was a lot of fun and I felt for her and everything she went through, but it didn't really go any further than that. And the plot about making sure that nobody discovers these 3 young witches living together in a house with another witch, it just felt a little bit contrived and convoluted, and it felt a bit like a way to make sure there was a bit more plot than an actual organic part of the story. So if you like cozy romantic fantasies, I do recommend picking this up because it was a lot of fun, but it wasn't mind-blowing. And then the last book I finished in March was Babel by R.F. Kuang. I read this for another reading prompt, although I definitely wanted to read this anyway. But this I read for the A Year in Albia Magical Readathon year-long reading prompt thingy. And the prompt for that was Fight a Giant. That meant you had to read a book that was over 500 pages long, and this is definitely over 500 pages long. This is a very popular book that came out in 2022. And it's a historical fantasy book that takes place during the early 19th century and is set at Oxford University. Oxford University, of course, exists, and a lot of this is based on actual Oxford. But the one big change that is made is that Oxford now has a big tower in the middle of it, and this is where the Royal Institute of Translation is housed, also called Babel. Babel is a very important part of just Britain in general. It kind of fuels imperialism and colonialism, but you'll get to know more about that when you read the book. This is where translation happens, and translation is very important for the production of certain silver bars. This is called silver working, and these silver bars are, well, they're kind of magical because through the use of 2 words in different languages that mean roughly the same thing, they can enhance certain things, they can produce certain effects. So for example, a silver bar underneath a train with a certain translation can make sure that this train goes faster, is safer, things like that. And these silver bars are all over Britain, but of course they're expensive, so mostly the rich benefit from them and the poor really don't. In fact, it just creates a wider gap between the rich and the poor. We follow Robin, who is born in Canton, China, from a Chinese mother, but when he is about 8 or 9 years old, a professor takes him from China to Britain to become his protege and to kind of get him ready for a life as a translator in Oxford. We follow Robin. There are 3 other important characters in here as well who are his friends. We follow them throughout their studies at Oxford. This is such a big book that covers so many important topics that I don't really know where to start and not keep talking for a half an hour, because that's really not what I want for this video. Let's just start by saying that I gave this 4.25 stars, and I had really expected this to become a 5-star read, but there was something that kept me from fully connecting with this book. And I think it was the characters, because the writing is amazing, the themes of colonialism and imperialism and capitalism are amazing, the way that is really deconstructed and deeply criticized is amazing. I really enjoyed that. I really like the aspect of translation because it goes very deeply into that as well. And I, as a language student, very much enjoyed that. But the characters didn't really come through for me. Robin is a very bland main character. He is kind of boring, really. The truly interesting characters were his 3 friends, Rami, Letty, and Victoire. I would have loved to have seen more from them, but I think it happens quite often with dark academia books like this, that the main character is a bit of a boring person, the person who is a bit more passive and watches it all, and the really interesting characters are the people he surrounds himself with. That was definitely the case for this as well, although he does develop throughout the book. But seeing everything through his eyes, I don't know, it wasn't boring. I was never bored throughout this book, but like I said, there was something holding me back from fully connecting to the story, to the characters, to everything that happened. I should have had a book hangover from this book, and I really didn't. It was memorable because it felt so unique, but I'm also not going to think about this very much anymore, I think. So I definitely highly recommend it because it's a very good book. I would recommend it just for the criticism of imperialism and colonialism, because you learn a lot about that from this. Of course, I knew a lot about that as well, but this book really goes into it and I appreciate it for that. I love where it went with this book, but it wasn't the new favorite I'd hoped it would be. But perhaps my expectations were a bit too high. Who knows? And those were the books I read in March. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any thoughts on Babel or any of the other books I mentioned, or if you want to let me know about the books you read in March, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to chat about it. Please like this video and subscribe if you want to see more of me in the future, and have a wonderful day. Bye!